The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Brodinsky. This is the episode for April 25. On my right is the one and only incomparable and internationally acclaimed editor of the Meriden Record Journal, Ralph Tomaselli. Ralph, I got to explain to our viewers one more time why you're internationally acclaimed. It's because my wife's family from Toronto often tunes in, and that's the cross-border connection. A programming, though, we got a little bit of bad news on a little programming. Yeah, you know, Christine Mansfield was on last week, right, and her show was supposed to have aired on this past Monday and this past Tuesday and didn't. What happened? I don't know. And it was a little bit of a hiccup at WPAA. Okay. So what we're going to do, which happens. It happens. So what we're going to do is after this Citizen Mike show, ends on Thursday, and we're starting it at 9, and we'll end it around, around 10. Right. At 10 o'clock, the Christine Mansfield show is going to come on. So folks, you get 2 straight hours, pretty close to that, of the Citizen Mike show. Special guest in the studio tonight, but stay tuned because the next show is with Christine Mansfield from last week. And so she will be on, or that show will be on Thursday at 9, right, Friday at 9, and Monday the Thursday at 10, right, Friday at 10, okay, and Monday the 29th at 10. And right, that's our makeup game. That's our, because right, of the glitch, because we didn't want to short sheet Christine. It was a good show. Yeah, it was a good show. However, we have a special guest in the studio, Republican Town Councilor Craig Fishbein. Always the bold and the brave, the outspoken, the not timid. Craig, it's good to have you on the show again. It's been too long. I think maybe 6 months ago you were on the show last.
I think so.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mike.
Good evening. Thanks for coming on. We got a lot of things to talk about 2 hours worth, but it's only a 1 hour show. So what I'm going to do to solve that is talk faster.
Good, talk fast.
Yeah. We're in the middle of the budget session, and it's a fluid situation. Things are changing in Hartford, and we get news and whispers and rumors, I don't want to say every day, but from Hartford about what's happening up there because the state legislature is tinkering with Governor Malloy's budget. Craig, I don't know if you have your ear to the ground, but I thought I'd ask, is anything cooking up in Hartford that you know of that may impact the Wallingford budget?
My ear is usually to the ground. It's my understanding that the Appropriations Committee today, it was announced that what Wallingford had anticipated to receive from the state of Connecticut is going to be minus about $2.3 million. And that is not in stone at this point. It's a projection. The budget has not been voted on. That minus might get larger, it might get smaller.
So what does that mean, at least as far as your approach to the budget? If the state of Connecticut short sheets the town of Wallingford by $2 million, 2.5, or whatever the number is, what should the approach be in your view?
I think the budget should be reviewed as far as what I've characterized in the past as being frills, and those should be cut out. I don't think we have the room to take the $2.3 million out of the reserves and still maintain the bond rating. And I guess the other thing that has to be considered is where is that lack of funding coming from? Is it coming from the ECS grant?
That's educational cost sharing?
Yeah. Is it coming from there or somewhere else? I mean, we're fortunate in one aspect in that the budget hasn't been booked. It would be a totally different situation if I think it's May 10th, had come and gone. We'd already voted on the budget, it was in the book, and then we get this news. It still might fall that way because the state budget might be voted on in June, you know, but at least we have some advance notice.
Ralph?
Well, one place to start, I would think, might be something that Mike has done a good job pointing out on the show, is departments where there just have historically been surpluses. And I think Public Works and the Police Department jump out at me as places where, you know, you have these six-figure amounts of money that aren't spent by the end of the year.
I agree, or like last year we discussed the town planner position. There was money appropriated to have a town planner as well as an assistant town planner. We don't know whether, well, that money was not all spent. There's about $100,000 that was left that I don't think anybody really anticipated actually spending, but it was booked. And so I totally agree. There's things like that that should be looked at.
Craig, is a tax increase one of the things that's possible?
Well, I think the tax increase is already projected in the current budget.
I mean an additional tax increase in view of this new news. It's not news yet, but this possibility that the state may cut us back by $2 million or more.
Oh, I think definitely that that is something that the mayor would consider, and you know the balance of the council would consider as well.
So, Ralph, the drama is not over. See, you know, when the budget process started, you know, I went on the show and said, this is a big yawner. There's no drama. There's no excitement. It's very routine. And here we may have some excitement yet.
And I'm trying to remember, what was your original prediction?
Oh, you're looking over my shoulder.
No, I'm really not trying to look over your shoulder.
Well, I'm going to bring in a slide next week after this, but I want to go over now. I'm going to bring in a slide next week after the story gels a little bit. But in a show that you and I did at the beginning of the year, I think it's probably the first show in February, we were being a little playful, as we often are.
Yes.
And I said, this budget isn't so hard to figure out. And I put up like a very, you know, a quickie slide on the screen. And I predicted that the Board of Ed would get about $2 million out of the budget, and it's about right.
Okay.
So I hit it there pretty close. I thought general government would get about a $500,000 increase, and the mayor gave me about an $800,000 increase. And I predicted at that time $1.7 million loss of state funds. Well, I was wrong until today, where it looks like 1.7 might not be a bad estimate. And when you factor in the growth of the grand list, unless there's other cuts that are going to be made, just how that pieces together, it's about a 3% tax increase. Right now, the mayor has about a 0.9% tax increase. So, you know, the slide that I put up, the predictions I made at the beginning of the year, they're not dead yet. You know, we may revive them. Craig, let's change the subject. You've been in the news. It's been a lot of fun for Ralph and me, you know, to talk about what's going on, but it's also instructive because we learn about, you know, policies and perspectives. Back on April 9 at the town council meeting, you wanted to ask a question. And Mike in the booth, tee up, if you would, Craig's Q&A, and I'll cue you in a second. But you wanted to ask a question after the members of the public were done. You were shut down rather abruptly by the chairman, and that led to other cascading events. I want to get your perspective, but first let's show this little clip that we have for the audience at home so they can see exactly what happened. 3, 2, 1. Mike, roll it.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Oh, excuse me, please. Okay, it's public question and answer.
So I'm going to sit out there and raise my hand?
No, it's public. Okay?
I'm the public, too.
Not tonight, you're a councilman. Any other comments? Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
What happened there? What happened that night? Give us your perspective on this.
Well, actually, it started earlier in the day. I had a resident call me and complain that they had gone to town hall to get a budget book I believe it was on Monday morning. It was either Friday afternoon, I think it was Friday afternoon, and they called me on Monday morning, and they were unable to get a budget book, and I know that the budget books are supposed to be out before the public hearing, and I knew that the public hearing was scheduled for the 10th, which would have been the Wednesday after this Tuesday meeting. So I wanted to ask what was going on with the budget books and how come we weren't having open and transparent government with regard to the budget books. You know, it was just a couple of months ago that I had asked to speak during public question and answer, and I was given that permission. So I waited for everyone else to be done, you know, from the public. There was nobody else raising their hands, so I said I have a question, and that wasn't allowed to be asked. So I was told that because I was sitting up there, I was a counselor, I couldn't ask this question. So I said, well, okay, then I'll go sit in the audience like the other people, and I'll just raise my hand and you know, bring that to the attention of the body, because I thought it was very important. But unfortunately, that did not occur.
Ralph?
I think maybe, you know, when the public hears that a counselor doesn't have an opportunity to speak, I think they're probably surprised by that. So, you know, can you just quickly, what is the rule that wouldn't allow you to have some opportunity to make a comment about a budget book? What is the rule that's in play here?
To my knowledge, there's no rule. It's the chairman's discretion as to whether or not to recognize anyone to speak at any time, essentially during a council meeting, is my understanding.
Right, and again, that I think people might find that a little jarring, that their elected representative doesn't have an opportunity to speak at some point.
And that's where I agree, and that's where I felt disappointed and somewhat defeated, in that I had a constituent contact me about a concern, and my job as an elected official is to try and address those concerns. And you know, I like to discuss things and find out why, and the fact that that investigatory process or inquiry was not allowed to happen was, I didn't like that.
Was Bob Parisi right in shutting you down, or was he wrong in shutting you down?
I think he was wrong in shutting down, not even entertaining the question. You know, I guess, you know, to make a blanket statement like that, I think would be inappropriate, but not to know what the question is and just to say, you can't ask anything, I think that is wrong.
Should the rules be changed in view of this to make it clear that either counselors may not make a comment during question and answer, or they may, time permitting? How should it be approached?
I think to go forward, I think the rules should be changed, and perhaps you know, if a counselor wants to ask a question, you know, they have to be in the audience, something like that. Have some procedure, but to have no procedure and then to have it change on a whim, I don't think is the way that government should operate.
So that was the first chapter
Right.
in this story. It's a multi-chapter story. That was the first chapter. The next day is the public hearing.
Yes.
Okay. The Record Journal covered that, and it was a story written by Andrew Regali, and these stories, our viewers, I hope, know, go up in the Record Journal website.
Mm-hmm.
And if you log into the Record Journal website, you can post up a comment as to your reaction to the story.
Sure.
Well, this story about the aftermath of what happened here, this story got 13 comments, which I think is maybe a record for this year.
It's certainly a lot.
I don't remember another story
No.
that stirred so much controversy than you know, this event and
Right.
the events that followed. So let's bring our viewers up to date as to what happened after. The Record Journal reported it this way. To the dismay, you know, we called it apoplectic last show. Remember that? Never
Yeah.
mind. It's dismay,
that graphic.
but it's dismay, so I got to tone it down.
Yeah.
To the dismay of his fellow Republicans, Town Councilor Craig Fishbein refused to take his assigned seat during Wednesday's Town Council budget hearing, opting instead to attend the meeting as a member of the public. Now, there was a photo of Craig in his camouflaged hat. It was a photo taken by Christopher Zajac. And if I ever saw a pose photo, this was not a candid. Craig is there, very thoughtful, with his, hand
how
on his
Craig
chin.
is.
Oh man,
Isn't that how he is
if
most
that
of the
wasn't a
time?
pose, he knew that camera was there. That was but it's a handsome shot.
It does look
It's a handsome shot. Whatever you say about it. So then. The article goes on, and Andrew Regali must have racked up a big phone bill because he talked to everybody, getting quotes. It's only an hour show. We can only do a few. Vinny Cervoni said that he didn't think Craig Fishbein's actions were appropriate. I think there was a more constructive way to deal with his displeasure of Chairman Parisi. I think historically the public question and answer period is for the benefit of the public. They have a much more limited ability to get issues on the council agenda. Actually, let me go back to the top of the article. It reports on the second paragraph that Craig sat by himself in the back of the auditorium during the public hearing protesting a decision made by Town Council Chairman Robert Parisi, also a Republican, a night earlier. So as reported, we're going to check with Craig in a second, the ruling by Chairman Parisi that Craig couldn't ask a question resulted in Craig sitting in back with his camouflaged hat to the dismay. To the dismay. Okay. So we're going to keep going with some of these other quotes.
Go ahead.
I felt that as an elected official, Craig Fishbein should have been at the council bench, Republican Town Councilor John Letourneau said. He should have been with the rest of the councilors at the table. It is our duty to be here, not in the audience. Skipping to Tom Laughlin, I don't have time for the games. I think it's insulting to the public, but it's insulting to the rest of us. Skipping back to Cervoni, he said, well, he didn't agree with Fishbein's action, but he did agree with his fellow councilor, with Craig, on the availability of budget books, and said it's probably more beneficial to have to the public to have these books available in advance of the hearing. Craig, let's go to you. What were you thinking? You went back. It was a protest. Did it work? Would you do it again? Just what was your rationale for handling it that way?
The characterization of a protest, I don't know that is absolutely correct, in that one would have to read into my mind to determine whether or not it was a protest. My intent was since I was unable to ask the question on behalf of the constituent from being up in the council chair, if there was the opportunity to ask a general question about the budget in total, it was my intent to raise my hand at that time and to go to the microphone and ask about the budget books. Unfortunately, the way the budget session, the public session was structured, there was no portion that was generally about the budget. Everything was by department. So I didn't get that opportunity. So it was my intent to ask a question as a member of the public that night, but that didn't occur. So, for a protest, I mean, I guess you could see it that way. I was trying to meet my duties as a counselor.
Ralph?
Well, I think what I'm curious about, and both of you have sat on the council, so I haven't. Why couldn't this have been worked out? I mean, clearly you were trying to ask a legitimate question about budget books. I understand, Bob as chairman has some control over the meeting, has lots of control. I guess, why couldn't this have been worked out before this next meeting? I mean, couldn't it have, rather than all these people in the newspaper saying things like Tom Laughlin, I don't have time for games, I think it's insulting to the public, and I'm not agreeing with that. Why couldn't there just been some working out, especially when you're all part of the same political party?
The problem was the timing.
Okay.
The town council meeting in which I attempted to ask the question happened on the 9th.
Okay.
The public hearing on the budget was the very next night.
Right.
So there was no time, you saying, between the town council meeting and the public hearing?
Meeting, clearly, you and Bob are at an impasse. You and Bob are having a disagreement on the 9th. I don't think there's any doubt about it. As you watch
about that
video.
singular
Yeah.
issue,
and
yes.
that it couldn't have been worked out before the 10th, so that all this, fighting amongst people of the same party didn't have to play out. I'm not putting it all on you, Craig. I'm just curious as to why it just couldn't be worked out.
I don't know how it could have been worked out. What are you
Okay,
suggesting?
maybe I'll try it another way. And I'm going to put Mike on the spot. All right. Mike, because Mike's been on the council, and maybe, you know, maybe you've seen a similar situation. I mean, isn't there a way to work these things around these things without them developing into this?
Oh, sometimes there is a way, and sometimes there's not a way.
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you that that night on the 9th, I had to be somewhere else. It was a very short agenda. There was really no controversial items on that. The only reason why I went to that particular council meeting that night was to ask that question. I ended up actually leaving that meeting early after not being able to ask that question.
Greg, I want to press you on this protest because most folks interpret it, just reading the comments, people I've talked to, the counselors, most folks interpret you're sitting in the back with a camouflage hat as a protest, as a demonstration to draw attention to your cause. I'm trying not to make a judgment on that because protests are often the right thing to do, and you certainly got some publicity, some exposure for the point you're trying to make, so in that sense it worked. Wasn't there some measure of protest and attention-getting strategy on your part to draw attention to what you wanted to say?
There was a level of that. I just didn't want anybody to think that I just sat in the back row and pouted. I mean, I went there with the intent of asking a question that I was unable to ask the night before, and that didn't happen that way. But yes, you know, you have to admit that there was a level of protest, absolutely.
So this action by Craig to be a little playful here, to sit in the back with his camouflage hat, which is an attention getter, and to pose very nicely for the photographer, yielded a reaction from some of the town councilors that just didn't appear in the Record Journal. Facebook had a back and forth and a back and forth and a back and forth and a back and forth between Craig and Councilor Vince Cervoni and maybe some others. I'm not that sure of that, so I'm not going to mention any names. But it was somewhat amusing to read. I can give you a flavor of a little bit. Again, this is on Facebook. Craig is posting, and I'm going to pick up in sort of the middle of a conversation. I can't go right back to the beginning. He said, the thoughts comment was regard to your claims that someone sitting in the audience and not saying a word is somehow disruptive. Gee, if that's disruptive, there are a lot more problems than one can possibly imagine. Vinnie Cervoni fires back, Craig, I never said that your choice to sit in the audience with a camouflage hat pulled down over your face was disruptive. Craig fires back, and I never said that you specifically did not have your own thoughts. I respect you much more than that. Vinnie Cervoni retorts, but you just said your thoughts comment was with regard to my claims that someone sitting in the audience and not saying a word is disruptive. Please make up my mind. Craig loads up and fires. You are correct. Good thought. Craig follows up. Vinnie Cervoni follows up. And it's this banter back and forth. And I'm reading this, and I'm saying, oh, my goodness me. What's the rationale for this banter? I mean, it's kind of surprising.
It's kind of surprising.
Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I'll leave my question like that. I'll leave it hanging. Yeah.
No, Vinnie and I think, have an excellent relationship. I respect Vinnie a lot, and there was a comment in the article, something, I forgot, there was some comment in the article, and it was prompted by the reporter saying to me that other counselors had said that my sitting there was disruptive. And he didn't identify what counselors, and most reporters wouldn't. And based upon the other quotes in there, I had assumed that when one talks in the plural, that those counselors were Vinnie Cervoni, Tom Laffin, and John Letourneau, or some combination of more than one of them. So my statement to that effect was in line with my understanding. And Vinnie and I, we have conversations, but there's nothing there that I really have a problem with, and we haven't spoken about it since.
Ralph?
Well, I think this was all posted on Facebook.
Yeah.
I have to admit, and it's not a question, it's just a comment. Sometimes I'm not as active on Facebook as some people are, and sometimes I see the threads, and I guess there's people that use social. Sometimes I take social media comments differently than people that are on social media all the time. My only comment.
Well, why take this conversation on Facebook? Why do that? I mean, why just stay off Facebook and you know, have a phone conversation, or you know, what was your thinking in that regard?
I think what prompted it in the thread was there was an initial comment, and because Vinny, Tom, and I are friends on Facebook, I saw that comment, and it had something to. It was like a misinterpretation of what I had said, and that's what started the conversation. And you know, at times we've all had exchanges like this. So you're saying, why not take the whole thing offline?
Yeah, why not just shut down the public or quasi-public conversation? Sort of don't air that laundry. I'm not saying it's dirty laundry, but don't air that laundry. Keep the conversation private, and maybe everyone's better off. That's the choice you had, but
yeah,
you decided to go sort of public with it.
Well, there's certainly, you know, to turn on and off the public button, the initial post was public. So, and I certainly have had conversations with those individuals that it's gotten to a point that we have taken it off offline on certain issues. But I saw this as being innocuous, really. Okay. There was really no. It was like a couple of brothers, you know, having a little Donnybrook.
Well, okay. So that wasn't the only Facebook exchange. There was another post that you made responding, and this is the same subject matter, but different days and different times. And you wrote this, enemy of the right to address your elected officials are enemies of mine already, you wrote. There are no rules against what I ask to do. We are not slaves yet to the system. We are elected officials to whom citizens periodically express complaints and concerns. For those complaints and concerns not to be able to be addressed is wrong and more more aligned to Nazi Germany than any America that I have ever known. It just seems that's taken the rhetoric a notch up.
That particular post
yeah.
was in response to my nephew, Kyle, who, if you look up higher in the thread, he didn't understand why I was standing up for what I believed in. And it was, in fact, I think that particular post is, the beginning of it says @Kyle with the,
yes.
you know, the @ sign.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. You know, certainly it's not with the other counselors. It's, I guess if you want to call it rhetoric, I guess. But certainly I was quite distressed that as an elected official, a good faith question about a town matter was not allowed to be addressed.
Ralph?
Well, I happen to agree with you on that. I think the thing is, you know, how do you work it out with the chairman? And was there another way rather than these very visible things, which, let me just say again, I think your original point was right. And you certainly have the right to sit in the council chambers and post on Facebook, but did it influence Chairman Parisi in any way? Because that seems to be the person that is going to resolve this issue of whether you get to ask these questions, or did it harden his stance even more?
I don't know.
Right.
I mean, certainly since I asked that question, no one else from the council has attempted to do what I did. So as far as testing his stance on the whole thing, that hasn't occurred. I believe it was in the article that Andrew Regali originally put out that Chairman Parisi recognized that from time to time there's been the rule has morphed, and that I guess his position now is that nobody speaks during public question and answer. But I'll tell you, the very next night when I sat in the audience, while the public is asking questions about the budget, counselors were allowed to make statements, very brief statements. But so I don't know that it's changed or that there's any rule of law behind any change.
Let's change another issue, but it still goes back to April 9. And Mike in the booth, get ready to tee up. It's a little video involving Bob Parisi and Bob Gross, reloop, I think I have it called. Get ready to tee that up. So, as part of the question and answer on April 9, Bob Gross, who is a regular at the council meetings, goes to a microphone and asks a question about how the council materials that back up the agenda are distributed. That was a general issue. You and I have talked about that. And just to refresh our memories, currently it is distributed by police officers.
Absolutely.
Take time out from their day and they distribute the hard copies to all the councilors. And in a prior discussion, maybe we go back, you and I, Ralph, maybe a month or even more, we're saying, maybe what it ought to be, it's electronic delivery through the internet ought to be required. That ought to be Plan A. And if someone wants a hard copy, they make a special request. And don't bother the police with it anymore, and don't waste all that paper. And that was the idea. Well, Bob Gross went to the microphone. Mike, are you ready for this? And he asked this question. 3, 2, 1, hit it.
There was an interesting letter to the editor this morning by Richard Kaplan, and it was in the Record Journal, by the way. There you go, little plug for your paper. Question is, in that letter that he had, it was about on how you receive your backing material for the agenda. Does anybody up on the council receive it electronically? Through the chair to any of the councilors, does anybody receive it?
I don't believe they do. I
Oh.
don't believe they do.
Then can I ask Ms. Weeks then, through the chair?
No, I don't believe they do. Why? What is your...
Well, because I'm under the understanding, I think, that some councilors do receive it, and I know it's been done in the past.
Well, I guess if they request it, they can have it.
But it's doable is what I'm asking.
I think, Sandy, is it doable? Yes, it is, because Councilman Spiteri had to be able to get it.
Just was asking because it's just it was an interesting letter. Thank you. Does anybody up in the council receive it electronically? Through the chair to any of the councilors, does anybody receive it?
I don't believe they do. I don't
Well,
believe they do.
Then can I ask Ms. Weeks then, through the chair?
No, I don't believe they do.
So I was stunned by that exchange.
Okay.
I was stunned, and I wanted to get Craig's reaction. Bob Parisi seemed to be uninformed or forgetful or in denial about this electronic delivery of agenda packets. It just blew me away. Craig, what was your reaction to that exchange?
I felt handcuffed because it's public question and answer, and the unwritten rule is that the chairman only answers questions. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, wait a second, I usually get the packet electronically. I want to answer this question.
Just say that again. You usually get it electronically?
Many times I do, and
Okay.
that's something that I instituted in 2010-ish because I was, I archive everything. And I had this big stack of papers behind my desk in the office, and it was like ready to fall over. And I'm like, this is so ridiculous. So I contacted Sandy, and I said, you used to do it for Mike Spiteri. Can you just do these electronically? And that way I can just make a file, make a folder in the computer, and I'm all set. And most of the time I get it. Not all the time. And I made it clear to her, that I don't want that to be your main job. If you got time, I appreciate it. But I don't want, other things that are important to go by the wayside. I just have a little funny story to tell about that. The packet for the April 9th meeting, comes out on April 5, the previous Wednesday. And it's about 8 o'clock at night, and I had forgotten something at the office, and I had court the next day. And I get a call on my cell phone. It's my aunt. And the police had called like a rental property that she has, and frantically looking for me. And so she calls me. She's concerned, and I'm like, "Oh, what did I do? The police need to see you by midnight." It was what she was told. And I'm like driving, and I'm sweating. Oh, what did I do? My father's going to have to bail me out. I get to the police station. It's like, "We wanted to deliver your council packet," and I was, "You guys have my cell phone," and I was beside myself. They also called my father's house. Didn't call me, and I know they have my cell phone. So, funny little story.
So how do you explain the chairman's initial befuddlement? Can we do this electronically? Do we do this? I don't think we do this electronically. Sort of denying we do it electronically, and then, Sandy, do we do the? Oh yes, for Mike Spiteri, when you've been getting it for a long time, other councilors have been getting it for a long time. There's a small group that gets these things electronically. Yet we got this answer. Why?
I can't speak for another human being as far as how they answer a question. I just know from experience what the answer to the question may have or should have been.
What should it have been? And then we'll go to Ralph. What should?
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, just a comment.
Yeah.
I don't know why everybody isn't getting it electronically, because your excellent point about the chairman's confusion, and I think that's extremely important. But also, too, is the fact that police officers are taking time to deliver things to counselors when they apparently don't have time to do a drug drop-off. I think that's why this came up again, that, Chief D'Ortenzio was so adamant that he didn't have any time. Well, he's got counselors driving all around the town trying to look for Craig.
Well, let's set the record straight tonight, and I'm going to ask Craig to pick me up if I misstate or have a misemphasis. So let's set the record straight. The town council for a long time has had the ability to send a packet material out to councilors by the internet. There is a machine in the town council office that copies and scans almost simultaneously. You just feed it into the scanner, and it shows up on your computer screen. And after that, it's sort of a drag and a click, and it can go off through the internet. So it doesn't take a lot of time to do that. We've had the ability to do it for a long period of time. Councilors have been getting it very often. I don't want to say all the time, but very often for a long period of time. That's the state of affairs, and it seems as though the leadership is sort of resistant to admitting that truth, to remembering that truth, or to sort of leading us into the future and say electronic is the way to go in the future.
Good point.
Craig, finish that up.
Well, not only is that true, and I agree. Well, I agree with the infrastructure portion of that statement. Sandy, the council secretary, in the new budget, it's anticipated she's getting a new copier/scanner. And we asked the other night at the budget meeting, because right now it scans to her computer, and then she's got to go to the computer and create the email and then send it. Will this copier/scanner be able to do it right from the machine? And she did follow up the next day saying that she can email. Her understanding is that she'll be able to email right from that machine, which makes it even easier.
Let's change the subject.
Yeah.
So I need a segue to get into the next issue. And I was thinking about this for the last 3 or 4 days. I knew Craig was coming on, and we'd be discussing his Facebook posts and his disapproval, to put it mildly, of Len Fasano. So I was lucky. I found the segue in the Hartford Courant today, April 24. The headline is "New Gun Law Exposes GOP Split." I think everyone watching this show knows that Craig Fishbein feels very passionately about the Second Amendment. He is a gun rights advocate, a Second Amendment advocate. He is vocal, he is outspoken, he is articulate, and he's not bashful. So I wanted to sort of, lead into this, and so the Hartford Courant starts off the article this way: the historic votes on gun control during the last few weeks in the General Assembly and in the U.S. Senate have exposed deep fissures among Connecticut Republicans struggling to define their moderate brand of politics. some Republicans view the party leaders who helped craft the state's sweeping new gun control law as traitors guilty of selling out the Constitution. Skipping way ahead. No, the next paragraph. Quote from some Republican who I don't know. These Republicans stood on the throat of our forefathers and crushed the breath out of them. Mary Ann Turner, the outspoken Republican chairwoman of Enfield, wrote in a recent email to other town committee members in north central Connecticut, the political cannons have been fired. Now skipping down, roiling anger over the gun vote. And let me just digress. You know, if you're going to have anger, don't make it the common variety kind. Don't make it, you know, the bland kind. Make it roiling, you know. Make it count.
Sounds angry.
Yeah, make it royal. So roiling anger over the gun vote is likely to have repercussions in the 2014 Republican race for governor, and it goes on to give further details. Craig, I gather, and we're not going to get into the details of the gun control. I didn't brush up on it. You know, that's really not the point. It's the other issues. I gather you are roiling, or almost, or roiling with anger over this, and that explains some of the communications that you've issued on Facebook?
I think the term that I used when I spoke to Senator Fasano was seething. Not roiling, seething with anger.
I like that.
Yes,
I like that.
Kind of like roiling.
I like that word. Well, on your Facebook page, and Mike in the booth, there is a Craig 1. Let's tee that up, and I'll give you the 3, 2, 1 count. The first slide is going to be sort of a long view of the post, but it's too big to scope out all the language. But at least you can get an understanding of it. And what this was is Craig put a flyer or an announcement of a informational meeting that Len Fasano, Republican State Senator Len Fasano, and Republican Dave Yaccarino had, and it's already come and gone, in North Haven on the gun law. And it says, understanding Connecticut's new gun laws. Mike, can you tee that up at this point, that Craig's slide 1? That's what it looked like. And you can see Craig's post, which we're going to blow up in a minute, on the upper right corner of that. And Craig was reacting to the gun issue, you know. And Mike, could you take that down and put the next one up, Craig slide 2? That may be hard to read unless you get real close to your TV screen. But it starts out, wow, they vote on it without knowing the impact of it. The state police and the Attorney General's office don't know how to interpret or apply all of it. And these traitors are going on tour to explain it. Ridiculous. And then look under the, I'm too bashful to read what follows. I get too squeamish. Usually I call Ralph the program prude, but I'm going to assume that role. Just look under those arrows. Those red arrows are mine to draw your attention to that. Mike, if you could take that down and put up Craig 3. So this is the product that Craig was referring to in the earlier post. And then let's take that down and ask Craig, what is going on and why this choice of symbolism? What was your thinking, and does this help? Mike, if you could take that down. What is happening here? I couldn't believe it. I was shocked, you know. And I think you were looking for shock value, and maybe you wanted shock value to sort of measure, to have people understand the depth of your anger. Maybe that's what was going on. But I was looking for some help understanding that.
You know, to measure the depth of my anger on April 4th,
yeah,
without comment from the public, a bill was signed, the ramifications of which most of the individuals who voted for it do not understand. They did not ask for input from people that know about firearms. The only input that they got was from the people that they exempted from having to fall within the confines of this law.
Well, but why this symbolism? Why put up a photo of KY jelly and sort of use this language? What were you trying to What were you trying to accomplish with that? What were you trying to communicate?
A level, a sense of displeasure and the feeling that the action by these individuals was akin to an act.
An act suggested by the product that you had photoed.
Yes, I think
Ralph?
that's clear.
Why-
He's speechless. We got the editor of the Meredith Record
Well,
Journal.
yeah, I know. 'Cause
Speechless.
I don't think we want to get into the act.
No,
Okay, and I don't want to.
And it wasn't publicly posted, so.
Right, and I think what I wanted to try to ask about was the use of the term traitor.
Okay.
Because I just, prior to this vote, I mean, what was your relationship like with Len?
Excellent.
Okay, so then I think my question is it, well, no, let me just ask you. I mean, so he's made one vote here that you disagree with. Otherwise, he was excellent. And is traitor, I just find traitor too strong of a word.
When you say one vote,
Right.
it's 139 pages long.
Right.
So it's a bunch of votes within one. You know, when they have a public hearing on these things, and they have a bunch of pages, and they still limit the public to 3 minutes, that's not one vote. So there was more than one vote. This was not a single item. And certainly Lenny knows that I know a lot about this stuff. And it was after his vote that he called me. In fact, a couple of days after that, he had somebody from his office call me to find out what my objections were. And that's totally inappropriate way for my state representative to conduct themselves. I mean, I had, you know, I don't know where we are on time, but you know, I had a client call me just today who, former FBI agent, his father's getting a little older. The father's still all with it, but he's got a couple of Glock handguns, and these particular Glocks take 13 rounds in the magazine. And he said, well, you know, Dad wants to transfer them to me. Now, this is a guy who can legally carry a handgun in any state of the union. And I had to tell him that based upon this law, your dad can transfer you the handgun, the gun itself, but he can't transfer you those magazines.
Well, here's what I don't want to do is get into the weeds on the gun control law, because I may disagree with Craig on the merits, and we can't, and it's not, we don't have the time to do that. So let's get to the point. Before we do that, Mike, we have another slide, the last slide. I think it says Craig 4. And that is the, I think it's like a campaign poster of Len Fasano with a tear through it. And
more than one tear.
More than one. He tore it to shreds, you know. I think it's roiling anger or seething, you know, that was the symbolism that he wanted to show. And the Facebook post was selling out your constituents because it is politically expedient is what more honorable people call treason. Mike, keep that up for just a second. The question I want to try to drill down on is you have a choice as to how to express your displeasure. It seems with this particular imagery and the other imagery that we talked about, you're burning bridges, you're getting people mad, and I don't know how you can get what you want with that kind of a treatment of those with whom you disagree. Respond to that.
You know, I don't have the power of the press. I don't, you know, when I can certainly write a letter to the Record Journal and express my displeasure on certain things, and certainly not using language like that, but I get every 30 days as opposed to some other people. You know, I certainly am vocal about certain issues, but I don't have the vehicles that other people have. And, you know, I agree that, you know, my standing up for my principles sometimes does burn bridges, but people have to understand that this is a problem. This situation, this ignorance of or ignoring of the public and just voting for something because it would have been much worse if we didn't vote for it, which is their argument, is very difficult for me to deal with.
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of friendships. So, I have people that are aligned with me politically, ideologically, but my principles override any friendship or anything like that. And I've been that way from the beginning of my getting involved.
Well, supposing in the future you wanted to contact Len Fasano for some constituent service matter, you wanted to contact a legislator, and he, remembers back, and he remembers this imagery and the language, the ramped up language, and maybe he doesn't take your call anymore. Is it worth it?
To stand up for what I believe in, absolutely.
Okay. I want to change to, which may be the last Facebook post, because we are running a bit out of time.
You're right.
And I think, Craig, you were in Florida when you posted this, and you're responding to someone who posted a comment, I think, before, and you said, Judy says, quote, "Why is it the progressive liberal that steals guns to then go and kills children in a school, Newtown, has never been an NRA member. Fort Hood is a registered Democrat, a Muslim. Columbine, too young to vote, both families are registered Democrats and progressive liberals. VA Tech wrote hate mail to President Bush and his staff, registered Democrat. Colorado Theater, registered Democrat, staff worker on the Obama campaign. Occupy Wall Street participant, progressive liberal. Connecticut school shooter, registered Democrat, hated Christians. Common thread is all these shooters were progressive liberal Democrats. You must be kidding.
No,
You can't be kidding.
That's something that I cut and pasted from someone else.
Did you adopt that thinking? I mean, is this your thinking?
All
It's
of
under
it-
your
all
it's
of
under your
it,
post.
no.
It's under your post. You disavow, and then, well, that's not
well,
right.
no, portions of it I do agree with,
Yeah.
but as far as, I think someone else, that's somebody else's thing.
Okay. It
Portion-
looks
I
like you
do recall part
adopted.
of it.
It looks like you adopted that as a thinking that you approved of, and put it on your post under your photo. And that's why I said,
I
"Whoa,
don't,
really?"
Portions of that, yeah, I do agree with, but as far as them all being, I mean, I usually research things,
Yeah.
and I couldn't make that statement.
Let me change the subject and ask you about some current issues. If you can get some quick answers, some quick questions on your approach to stuff in front of the council. American Legion building. Didn't get any offers. We probably are not going to get any offers to sell the American Legion building. What's your plan of attack now?
I would be asking the law department to go back to the court to get permission to perhaps take it down. I've been in there. I was just in there. You were on the front lawn that day that I went in there.
Yeah.
It's bad. It's worse than it was a year ago.
And I gather from your voting record that taking the building down is something you favored pretty much all along.
No.
No?
In fact, I was the swing vote. Originally, I think the first time I voted on, it was voted on before I got on the council, and then when I first got on the council, I think I voted to tear it down, but then when I found out from the mayor, there was no way he was going to put any money into it, then I found it to be inevitable, and I think I was the swing vote that voted to sell it. Since then, I've been voting to sell it, actually. But here, I think we're at a juncture, and let's just cut bait or fish.
Right. If there was a motion on the town council during the budget process to increase the mayor's salary by, say, I'm going to throw out a number, I'm just picking one out of the air, $15,000, under what circumstances would you be in favor or would you be against?
I think I'm generally in favor as long as there's an offset, there's a deduction somewhere. You know, I have never voted for a tax increase, and I don't think I've ever voted for a municipal wage increase either. So I'm having difficulty with the budget the way it stands right now with a tax increase. But I do think the mayor's pay should be raised.
Ralph?
I agree with Craig. I think the mayor's pay should be raised sooner the better.
Well, as a matter of strategy, here's the complication. So you go to look for a cut, and people start defending their turf. You know, departments start defending their turf, or if it's on the social services page, they defend their turf, and therefore no one agrees to the particular cut, and so the mayor's salary never gets raised, and the whole ship sinks because of the weight of the complexity that's been injected into it. $15,000, although in an infinitesimal way, in a negligible, de minimis way, puts pressure on taxes, the mill rate doesn't change one lick because of $15,000. I think Jim Bowes, the comptroller for Wallingford, was quoted at a meeting and says it has to be at the $40,000 level, and even that, I got to redo the math. I don't buy that. But let's assume that arguendo. It would have no tax impact, and we'll never get the raise for the mayor if we get bogged down in these other peripheral battles. What say you to that?
No, I understand, and actually, an additional $15,000 isn't enough in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, based upon the statistics, I think town managers as well as mayors, similarly situated towns, they're on average around 130. Is my belief. So, you know, I think the number should be around there. But I'm always looking to save money for the taxpayer. I mean, we even had this issue with Dry Dock the other night.
Yeah.
Didn't get any press on it, but they did add another $10,000 potentially to Dry Dock. And, you know, I was in favor of it if we cut something else out somewhere else.
I think what you're saying, and let's bottom line this, if a motion was made to raise the mayor's salary by $15,000 and there was no corresponding cuts to go along with it, you would vote no and keep the salary the way it is.
I can't, I would probably vote yes on that motion. I probably would, because there's a lot of other things. I mean, it's within my power to make a motion somewhere else to reduce.
Yeah.
You know, so in a vacuum, because the way the process is, as you know, it isn't, I mean, budgets are taken in line. So, you know, depending on where it fell, you know, if it's the last thing it's dealt with, then maybe I have a little bit more difficulty with it. But if it's in my control to do something like an offset, I would probably move that. In
the capital non-recurring budget, there is money set aside for the an extension, not an extension, but a leg, an offshoot from the of a trail. It's a boardwalk asphalt trail that would lead from the community lake parking lot to the senior center. The cost is $1 million. A grant is tied up in that, but the grant doesn't cover the whole cost. Just what's your view of that trail project for whatever money it may cost? That portion of the trail, as well as the Hall Avenue situation, I've been against, outwardly against. The problem with the cap and non-recurring, though, is the philosophy of the administration, rightly so, is that that money should be used for capital projects. So I think if you've got $1 million, if you can find capital projects or infrastructure that you're paying for in the regular budget and replace it, all for it. Suppose you can't. Well, then what happens to the money? I mean, it just sits there. Well, you can unlabel it and decide later. You know what I think the best idea is? Police station. Sometime in the next 10 years, there's going to be a new police station, at least contemplated. I think we need to start saving towards that. Take the $1 million, create an account, and start putting seed money in there. And that way, when we build the police station, we've got $5 million or whatever to start off with. Ralph, we got about 60 seconds for a question and answer. You got something on the tip of your tongue?
I don't.
CCM, you know, you were against joining CCM. We're seriously running out of time. You voted no. A quick rationale? Oh, I mean, I've proven to them that they were wrong on certain legal advice they've given. I've asked questions from them. I haven't gotten answers as far as them changing votes, changing positions, when their membership voted on it. There's been no follow-up. I don't trust them as a result of that, and I think it's a waste of our money. Let's make that the final word. Craig, thanks for coming on the show. Thank you. Again, you were a good sport. We appreciate it. Thanks, folks, for tuning in. Remember, right after this episode of the Citizen Mike Show, there's another Citizen Mike Show where we interview Christine Mansfield. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, if it is 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Good night, everybody.